Lila Hart walked quietly through the long hall of Brookvale High School. Her shoes were worn and her backpack was falling apart. The sound of her steps mixed with the laughter of other students. She kept her eyes down and tried not to be noticed. Her clothes were plain and clean, but old. Some students gave her strange looks. Others whispered and giggled as she passed by. She was used to it. Every day felt the same to her. She had learned to keep her head low and move fast. Lila lived in a small broken house near the edge of town. Her father had left when she was 10, and her mother worked long hours cleaning offices. Money was never enough. Lila worked evenings at a small diner, serving coffee and washing dishes. By the time she finished, it was late at night. She barely had time to do her homework before she slept. Most mornings she came to school tired, but she still came. Somewhere deep in her heart she believed life could change if she just kept trying. That day at school started like any other. Lila sat in the back of the classroom. The teacher spoke about a science project. Some students turned to laugh at her when she asked a question. A boy named Carson Hale sat near the front. He was tall, strong, and always surrounded by friends. Carson came from a rich family that owned half the town's shops. He liked being the center of attention. His smile looked perfect, but there was cruelty behind it. When the teacher turned to the board, Carson threw a small paper ball at Lila. It hit her shoulder, and her classmates laughed. She said nothing. He enjoyed that silence because it made him feel powerful. When the final bell rang, Carson and his friends waited by the door. Lila tried to walk past them, but they blocked her way. Carson smiled and said he wanted to show her something behind the gym. His voice sounded friendly, but his eyes did not. The group followed her, and soon she was standing by a cold brick wall behind the building. The air smelled of wet soil after the morning rain. Carson started making jokes about her poor clothes. His friends laughed loudly. Lila said she needed to go to work, but they did not listen. Then Carson pulled out his phone and told her to do something funny for the camera. Lila shook her head and tried to walk away. One of the boys stepped in front of her. Carson said she should bark like a dog since she was poor and dirty like one. Lila stood still. Her heart beat fast, but her face stayed calm. He repeated his command. His voice got louder. His friends began to chant and laugh. For a moment she wanted to scream, but something inside told her to wait. She bent her head and let out a short bark. The crowd roared with laughter. Carson kept filming. Each sound of mocking laughter felt like glass cutting her heart. When they finally walked away, she picked up her torn backpack and looked at the wall in front of her. It was covered with old posters that read "Fight Night Tonight." She walked home slowly through empty streets. Her hands shook as she thought about what happened. She hated that she could not fight back. But part of her also felt something rising inside, a kind of quiet fire that she knew too well. She reached her house, changed into her diner uniform, and left again. The rest of the evening she worked in silence. She smiled at customers, cleaned tables, and carried plates. No one there knew what had happened at school. When the diner closed, she walked behind the building and took off her apron. There was another alley behind the diner. At the end of that alley was a locked metal door. She took out a small key from her chain and opened it. A steep stairway led down to a basement where the air smelled of grease and sweat. In that dark place, a few men and women were wrapping their hands with cloth tape. A boxing ring stood in the middle, lit by a single hanging lamp. Everyone turned when Lila stepped in. Here she was, not Lila the poor girl. Here she was, the Phantom, the undefeated underground fighter. She tied her hair back and put on her gloves. As she stepped into the ring, the fire that had burned quietly all day burst alive inside her chest. The bell rang. Her first punch hit the heavy bag with a strong thud. Each strike made the pain fade. The laughter from earlier began to disappear from her mind. Every punch spoke for her. She did not bark now. She was a storm made of quiet anger and strength. In that small hidden world below the city, Lila Hart was not a victim. She was hope given form, waiting for the right moment to rise from the shadows and face those who thought she was weak. The night grew deep, and her arms kept moving until sweat dripped from her hands like rain. By the time she left the gym, the world outside was calm again, but inside her heart a new promise had already been made. The morning light slipped through the cracks in Lila's window. Her body ached from training, but her spirit felt stronger than it had in years. She dressed in her usual simple clothes and walked quietly to school. The video of her barking had already spread across the building. Every hallway carried whispers and laughter. She could hear her name mixed in their voices. A few classmates watched her with sneers and pointed at her phone screens. Lila kept walking. She would not give them the tears they wanted. Her face was tired but calm. She sat in the classroom with her head down. The teacher spoke about history, but her mind drifted away. She thought about the ring, the sound of gloves hitting the bag, the steady voice of her coach Eli telling her to move her feet faster. Eli Brooks was the man who had changed everything for her. He was tall, gray-haired, and had a calm voice that carried strength. He had once been a great professional fighter until one bad injury ended his career. When he saw Lila fighting off a thief near the diner years ago, he had seen in her something others missed. He offered to teach her not for fame, but so she could defend herself and find her own worth. After school, while other students went to parties or home to warm dinners, Lila went to the diner again. She worked until closing. Her arms grew tired carrying trays, but her mind waited for the night to come. When the lights went out and the streets turned empty, she changed her clothes and walked to the hidden gym. The basement was alive with noise, music, and the sound of fists hitting pads. Eli stood near the ring, nodding at her arrival. She climbed through the ropes, tape already wrapped around her hands. The gym lights reflected off her sweat as Eli spoke simple words that meant everything. Control your heart. Control your breath. Let pain teach you, not break you. Lila trained against fighters much older and stronger. Yet even the biggest men began to fear her speed. Her punches were sharp and quick, each one clean and full of purpose. When she sparred, Eli would stand by the corner, reminding her that strength was not just muscle. It was also patience and timing. Lila listened, soaking up every lesson like a dry sponge. She was not born into power and comfort, but in that dim gym, she built her own kind of power, hard and quiet. Every drop of sweat was a piece of her new life. Outside the ring, Lila spoke little. She helped younger fighters tie their gloves and shared her food when they forgot theirs. Some of them whispered about the Phantom, the mysterious fighter who never bragged, never talked, but never lost. None of them knew her real name. That mystery was part of her shield. The moment she left the gym and stepped back into the world above, she became the quiet poor girl again, unnoticed and plain. One night, Eli asked her if she ever wanted to show the world who she really was. Lila wiped her face with a towel and shook her head. She said she only fought to stay strong, not to be known. Eli smiled, understanding more than he said. He told her that someday, life would make her step into the light whether she wanted it or not. Lila looked down at her taped hands. She did not yet know that his words would soon come true. Days turned into weeks. The noise about the video began to fade as new gossip took its place. Lila thought maybe people would forget about her. She kept her focus on schoolwork and training. One night after a long practice, Eli told her that a local fight night was coming soon, and many underground fighters were joining. The prize was high, and it would bring many strong challengers. He wanted her to fight again and defend her title as the Phantom. Lila nodded without hesitation. Boxing was more than fighting for her. It was how she found her peace. When the night of the big match came, the basement was full of people shouting and waving money. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of feet stamping on the ground echoed through the walls. Lila warmed up quietly, her heartbeat steady. Across the ring stood her opponent, a tall man with heavy arms and scars across his chest. The bell rang and the fight began. It came in fast, swinging hard, but Lila slipped away with quick steps. She countered with a clean left to his side. The crowd gasped. Each round tested her will, but she refused to fall. Every punch she took reminded her why she was there. She was fighting away every insult, every laugh, every cruel word from the world above. By the final round, her eyes burned with focus and fire. One last strike sent her opponent to the mat. The crowd exploded with shouts. Lee's smile was proud but calm. Lila raised her glove not in triumph, but in silent strength. She had won again. But more than that, she had proved something to herself. She was no longer the girl who barked on command. She was the fighter who could turn pain into power and humiliation into courage. The next morning began with gray clouds covering the sun. Lila moved through another school day, quiet and steady. Her bruises from the fight were hidden under her long sleeves. She listened to the teacher, but her mind was still in the ring. Her body carried the memory of every hit, every breath, every second of that last match. The pain was familiar and almost comforting. No one at school suspected what she did at night. To them, she was still the poor girl who kept to herself. Across the hallway, Carson Hale sat on top of a desk, laughing with his friends. His easy charm always drew a crowd, but now there was tension behind his smile. Rumors had begun spreading about a secret underground fighter called the Phantom. People said this fighter never lost. Some claimed it was a myth. Others swore they had seen the matches. Carson's friends bragged that they knew everything about fighting, and he wanted to prove he was better than any hidden fighter. To him, it was another way to feel powerful. After school, Carson and his group hung around the parking lot. One of his friends, Riley Moore, told him a local trainer was holding sign-ups for new fighters in an underground event. Riley joked that Carson should enter just to see if he could beat this mysterious phantom. Carson laughed, but something in his voice showed excitement. He pulled out his phone and said he accepted the challenge. Riley filled out his form and sent it to the gym without much thought. None of them realized it was the same basement where Lila trained. The following night, the gym buzzed with music and voices. Fighters were practicing, gloves hitting pads again and again. When Carson walked in, heads turned. He looked out of place in his designer jacket, flashing that confident smile. Eli watched from the corner, shaking his head slightly. He could tell by the boy's posture that he was not there to learn but to show off. Eli asked him bluntly if he knew what real pain was. Carson smirked and said he was ready for anything. Eli told him he would get his match soon. Leela stood near the back, wrapping her hands in silence. She noticed Carson the moment he came through the door. Her heart skipped, and her breath seemed to catch. She knew she should stay calm, but memories of his cruelty flashed in her mind. The laughter behind the gym, the command to bark, the sting of humiliation rushed back like a wave. For a moment she wanted to walk away, yet something stronger held her there. This was the moment her coach had spoken about. The time when life would pull her from the shadows. Later that evening, as the crowd gathered, the list of names for the sparring matches was announced. Carson Hale versus the Phantom. The crowd cheered for the thrill of it, not knowing what they were about to see. Lila put on her gloves and pulled the hood of her sweatshirt low over her face. She walked toward the ring. Her breathing was slow and measured. Carson stepped in with an eager grin, waving at the watchers like he was stepping into a school sports game. He did not recognize her under the dim lights. The bell rang. Carson came forward quickly, swinging hard with wild punches. Lila moved sideways, calm as flowing water. She tapped him once in the ribs and another on the chin. The crowd shouted at the clean hits. Carson tried harder, frustrated that he could not touch her. Eli watched silently, his arms crossed. With each move, Lila's control grew stronger. Her years of training guided her body. It was not anger that powered her, it was discipline and focus. When she saw an opening, she struck with careful precision. Carson stumbled back, surprised and angry. By the second round, the fight belonged to her. Sweat rolled down his face. His friends in the stands shouted half-hearted encouragement, but he no longer smiled. He finally realized he was facing someone far beyond his skill. Lila's movements were smooth and sharp. She ducked under his punches and answered with strikes that echoed in the small space. When her final left hook landed, Carson dropped to one knee, gasping for breath. The crowd went silent for a moment. Lila stepped back, her chest rising and falling. The referee called the match. The Phantom had won again. Some people shouted with excitement, while others watched in confusion. Carson's pride was broken, but something else replaced it. He looked up at his opponent, and in that second, the hood slipped from her head. His eyes widened as he finally recognized her. It was Lila Hart, the same girl he had humiliated. His mouth opened, but no words came. Lila looked at him, calm and still. She did not smile or seek revenge. She reached her hand out to help him stand. The crowd watched in silence. Carson stared at her hand, unsure what to do, then finally took it. The moment was quiet, but powerful. Lila nodded once and stepped away. She left the ring without turning back. For her, the fight was not about proving revenge. It was about proving to herself that no one could ever take her strength away again. Carson stood there speechless, his thoughts turning like never before. Carson sat on the floor of the ring, his breath coming out in short gasps. The crowd had stopped cheering. The sharp sound of gloves hitting the floor echoed when he pulled his off. His pride felt heavier than the bruises on his face. The sting of loss was nothing compared to the shock of realizing that the quiet girl he had mocked was the one who had beaten him. Lila stood near the corner, calm and steady, waiting for him to get up. Her eyes were gentle but firm. She did not look angry or proud. She looked complete. It was the kind of strength that no one could take away from her. Eli stepped forward and helped lift the ropes for her to leave. Carson watched her walk out, feeling smaller than he had ever felt before. The people around the ring whispered among themselves. No one expected a poor schoolgirl to be the unbeatable fighter. Carson wanted to hide from the world. His friends avoided his eyes. They had laughed at Lila before, but now none of them dared say a word. Lila did not glance back once as she disappeared into the corridor that led outside. The next morning, the town's small corners buzzed with talk about the fight. The story of the mysterious fighter who turned out to be a young girl spread fast. Some did not believe it. Others admired her courage. Videos began to show her skill in the ring. The same people who once laughed now praised her name. At school, whispers filled the hall again, but this time it was different. There was respect hiding behind the words. Some students who had never spoken to her before tried to smile at her. Illa kept her focus and ignored the noise. She moved through the hall quietly, keeping her world simple. Carson did not return to school for 2 days. When he finally came back, his face carried a faint bruise and his pride hung low. He walked past the same people who once shouted his name. Now they gave him half smiles or nothing at all. He did not react. The old confidence was gone. He sat in class and for the first time really looked at Lila. She was taking notes with her calm focus, her pencil moving slowly. He remembered the way she had extended her hand to help him up after beating him. That single act had struck deeper than any punch. Lunch, Carson found himself walking toward her table. His heart pounded. He had no plan, but something inside told him it was time to speak. Lila looked up in surprise when he stopped near her seat. The cafeteria went quiet. Students watched closely, waiting for another fight of a different kind. Carson took a deep breath and said he wanted to talk. His voice was soft and uncertain, something rarely heard from him. Lila waited, her face unreadable. He said he was sorry. The words came out rough, but they were real. He said he did not understand her pain before. He said he had been cruel because it was easy, not because it was right. For a moment there was no sound. Lila stared at him and then nodded once. She told him that she accepted his apology, but forgiveness did not erase what happened. He said he knew. He said he just wanted to begin again as someone better. She looked at him for a long second and then said it was up to him now. He left the table quietly, leaving behind his pride and the laughter of his old friends who did not understand him anymore. Days passed and something inside Carson began to change. He stopped mocking others, stayed after class to help in small ways. He started going to the gym where Eli trained fighters. At first, Eli did not welcome him warmly. The coach told him strength begins with humility. Carson nodded and cleaned the floor without complaint. Slowly, Eli allowed him to train with beginners. Carson learned quickly that real fighting had nothing to do with showing off. It was about patience, effort, and respect. Sometimes Lila watched him from afar while finishing her own training. She never spoke much, but she noticed the change. He no longer carried the same arrogance. He worked hard, sweating without complaining. During breaks, Eli would point to Lila and tell the new fighters that she was the best they had. The others would whisper in awe, remembering her story. One day, after a long session, the gym emptied out until only Carson and Lila remained. He walked up to her and thanked her again. She smiled faintly for the first time since the fight and told him to keep training. The air between them was quiet but peaceful. There was no bitterness left, only a soft respect that came from both sides. They knew they could not change the past, but both had learned from it. When Carson left that evening, he looked back once to see Lila practicing her footwork in the empty ring. The steady sound of her movements filled the room like music. He realized that what made her strong was not her punches but her heart. That night, he wrote a note and left it on the gym bench. It simply said, "Thank you for teaching me what strength really is." When Lila found it, she held it for a moment and smiled again. The lesson went both ways. Weeks turned into months, and life in Brookvale started to move in a new rhythm. The memory of the fight became a story people told often, but Lila did not live by it. She still worked at the diner every evening, wiping tables and serving customers with quiet grace. In the mornings, she attended school, finishing her last year with good marks. In the late hours of the night, she still trained under Eli in the familiar underground gym. The ring had become her home, her place of peace and strength. Her only wish now was to use what she had learned to build something better, not just for herself but for others like her. Carson kept coming to the gym too. He arrived before sunrise some days and stayed after everyone left. He cleaned the bags, wrapped his hands carefully, and practiced each movement that Eli taught him. He no longer came to show off. He came because he wanted to grow. Eli watched the boy quietly and began to see real discipline where there had once been pride. Lila noticed it too. Though she did not speak much to him, she gave him small nods of respect during training. There was that quiet understanding between them now, a truth built out of pain and patience. One late afternoon, as the sun lowered and painted the sky gold, Carson came to the diner. Lila was behind the counter counting coins and wiping plates. When she looked up, she was surprised to see him holding a yellow envelope. He placed it on the counter and told her it was something he wanted her to see. She opened it slowly. Inside was a paper that showed the deed to a small, empty warehouse near the old train station. Lila looked at him in confusion. Carson said it was not charity, said he wanted to help her build a proper gym for kids who had no place to go, kids like she once was. His voice was steady, but humble. He said it was a way to make something right with the world. Lila did not speak at first. Her eyes softened as she folded the paper back into the envelope. She told him that helping others was the best kind of apology there could ever be. Carson smiled faintly and said it was something he truly wanted to do. From that day, they began working together. They cleaned the empty warehouse, fixing broken lights, and painting the walls bright blue. Eli joined them, bringing old mats and ropes. Soon the sound of hammers and laughter filled the space. Slowly, it turned into a living place, a simple gym where anyone could train for free. The sign above the door read Heartline Boxing. When the first group of children came, Lila felt something she had never felt before. She saw faces filled with the same fear and uncertainty she once carried. She taught them how to stand, how to move, and how to stay calm when life hit hard. Carson helped by showing them how to wrap their hands and stretch their arms safely. Eli often stood by the door watching proudly. The gym began to glow with energy and hope. It was not about fighting, but about believing. Month by month, the gym became a small light in Brookvale. Local people donated food and gloves. Kids from the streets found friendship and strength inside those blue walls. Lila felt her heart grow lighter every day. She had transformed her pain into purpose. Carson started to teach some of the younger boys too. He told them that strength was not about hurting someone, but about standing up for others. His words came from his own journey, and the kids listened closely. One rainy night, when everyone had gone home, Lila stood alone in the gym, looking around at what they had created. The sound of rain hit the roof softly. She saw the worn gloves hanging, the ring in the center, and the walls full of smiles from the pictures they had taken. Carson came in quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. They sat on the edge of the ring in silence, watching the storm outside. After a while, Carson looked at her and said that her story had changed more than her own life. Lila smiled and said she had not done it alone. He nodded, understanding her completely. They both knew that some bonds are formed not by comfort, but by struggle. When the storm ended, they closed the gym lights and walked out together. The street was wet and shining under the lamps. The town felt calm and alive. Lila looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. She felt the weight of her past fade just a little more. Somewhere inside, she knew the fight was never really about winning matches. It had always been about finding herself and helping others find the same strength. As they walked away from the gym doors, the wind carried the faint echo of their laughter down the quiet street. Lila no longer needed to hide in the shadows. She had built her own light, and it was bright enough to guide anyone who needed it. In that simple night air, 2 hearts that had once stood against each other now moved side by side, stronger than ever, tied by the quiet string of courage and kindness that would never break.